Are we on?
No, we are on.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's Cabinet meeting of today, the 28th of November 2024. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. We will, as usual, be using the Council's hybrid platform, the meetings being live streamed and recorded and will be uploaded to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. As usual, our microphones should be muted when we're not speaking to avoid any background noise or feedback. Anyone who wishes to speak should either activate their request to speak function or use the raise hand function. Finally, the chat function is purely to highlight any technical issues or to attract the attention of the Democratic Services Officer. So without further delay, we can move on to the agenda proper. And agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I believe that we're either all in the chamber or online, so there wouldn't be any. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2024. As I actually wasn't present for that meeting, I was engaged in other duties. Could I have someone to move and second the minutes as a true record?
Okay, thank you, Leader. I chaired the meeting, so I'm happy to move those minutes. If somebody could second.
And Councillor John is seconding.
I will second.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest, and if there are, the nature of such interest. I'm not aware of any being given, so unless anyone says anything now, we're okay.
No, they were none formally received for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is one of 4 references. The first one being the draft tree strategy. That's a reference from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd of October. And Mark, I believe you're going to take this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And can I also thank, before I start this brief item, is thank you for the members of the Economy, Environment, Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, because they really gave the strategy a good discussion. We had a really good discussion and it was really positive, and they made lots of recommendations which I'm now going to move forward to as part of the discussion. So we have lots of recommendations. The first one that they said that the public consultation results in relation be noted, and I'm happy to note that, support that the comments and suggested amendments to tree strategy also be noted. And number 3, that the following comments made by the committee on proposed final draft of the strategy be passed to Cabinet for its consideration prior to seeking its agreement. Now, we've had a discussion and we are quite happy with these points. So we're happy to support the following points: that consideration should be given to how communication could be strengthened to ensure that members of the public understand why and when trees have been removed in the local area. Second bullet point, ensuring that the relevant website will be strengthened to help facilitate greater information sharing around trees and strong engagement with Vale Glamorgan County elected members and town and community councillors on this as well. The third bullet point, that the council should continue to use all available leverage and means at its disposal to ensure that local developers safeguard and retain existing trees, and the new local development plans should specifically set out how developers will be required to deliver on their commitments to plant trees as part of this process. The fourth bullet point, to further promote opportunities for local community volunteers, support the implementation of this tree strategy, and to provide them with the means of undertaking this. i.e., consideration should be given on how volunteers could be given easy access to watering trees, such as use of water bowsers. And the final bullet point, the committee considers development and implementation and responses in the consultation process for the tree strategy to be exemplar of best practice and a clear demonstration of how the Vale Glamorgan Council can listen and respond to comments and feedback made by the public and other stakeholders in an effective and fair way. This approach should be, where appropriate, rolled out and moved across other consultation processes and that the council undertakes. I think the final bullet point really demonstrates how officers have worked really hard with the members to take into account the public's points and the group's points about the tree strategy. So I'm happy to move those. I'm looking for a seconder. So thank you.
If I can come back on there. Why is it? Oh, there we go. Thanks, Mark. Happy to second those. And I do think that the comments that they made actually chime really well with our intention to further boost our partnership working as part of the draft corporate plan that's under consultation at the moment. And funny enough, I mentioned it in a scrutiny the other day about the activities of people watering trees that we'd planted. And it was seen as humorous, but actually it's so essential, isn't it? It's so essential. And we've had a much greater success rate with trees surviving in dry weather. So very, very happy to second that. And I can't see any dissent within chamber or online, so that's agreed. Thank you. So if I can find agenda item 5, and this is a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of October, and this is Reshaping Programme Strengthening Communities. It's a response to the Audit Wales reports on tackling poverty and third sector working. The report that went to Corporate Performance and Resources set out the key findings and recommendations contained in reports produced by Compass following a programme of engagement that they'd undertaken, and said that was looking at Audit Wales reports focused on tackling poverty and working with the third sector. There was intensive engagement with both internal council officers, but also representatives of from external organisations such as the third sector, or voluntary sector, as some people call it, the social enterprises and town and community councils. So there was an interesting conversation around that, and there was a recommendation that the council undertake a detailed mapping of the sector to develop a comprehensive understanding of it. There was a comment which I find puzzling, saying that the council should hold the various third sector organisations and partners that it worked with to account. Well, that's not my understanding of the relationship that we have with third sector organisations and partners. Is actually we at the beginning of any relationship, we lay out our shared aims and we monitor any activities as they move along. So, if you look at the really valuable warm hubs that we've had, that most of those have happened as a result of local organisations, all the work that's gone on through the Shared Prosperity Fund, it's quite stunning the amount of support that St John's Ambulance has provided with the Falls initiative, where they go out when people's falls alarms are activated. And anyone walking down Hulton Road would see the Age Connects Cafe and all of a huge variety of activities they go on, totally apart from an organisation such as the YMCA Hub, which provides a home for some of our youth activities. So I'm a little bit puzzled by that, but I think we can say that in any partnership we should ensure that they're monitored and evaluated effectively. But I think holding to account is a bit strong. So in terms of the recommendations, so as I said, the recommendations from the committee was that we should undertake a detailed mapping of the sector. I think that's probably something that we could be talking to Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee about and in terms of going forward. And then the general comments were the importance of the council supporting social enterprise And yes, we are working towards that. The thing about holding various third sector organisations, as I said, I think that we monitor and evaluate partnership initiatives, but would question the wording on that. The benefits of working with external agencies and third sector partners would provide the council with an external perspective of the organisation, an opportunity to look at best practice from this sector. Well, funnily enough, within the recent peer panel assessment we've undertaken, there's been a lot of work with our partner organisations. And when that report comes through, we will have information on that. And similarly, looking at a similar external perspective from town and community councils, they also were interviewed as part and took part in focus groups as part of the peer panel assessment. So we'll have that. But also recently, I spoke at the One Voice Wales conference in Builth Wells and launched a memorandum of understanding between the WLGA and One Voice Wales to actually look at how we work in partnership, but also in terms of the corporate plan, the draft corporate plan, that there is a relationship section which actually spells out the relationship we're hoping to build with partner organisations. So I think that overall, most of those are in order. So I think we can just note those recommendations. So on that, I think I would just move that we note.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. And everybody happy with that? No further comments, that's great. Agenda item 6 is another reference, and this is in relation also in terms of reshaping programme, but this is an update, and this comes from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the same date as the last one, but I thought it was useful to take it second. A report went to them about the next phase of the council's transformational change programme. And this is the way in which we're looking to reshape services, make them more effective, more cost effective and fit for what we want to achieve as a council. So the report referred to reshaping in partnership with the community, talking to communities and I said looking at ways to provide better services. Refreshing the programme is quite important now because of the fact that we are taking forward a new corporate plan, which I think we've got till the 8th of December if anybody wants to put to comment on it. Appendix A has got the reshaping prospectus and the key parts which were discussed with members and how service projects and the transformation themes, criteria and guidance for service projects and how they'll be sort of prioritised as well as the governance and partnership and scrutiny arrangements. So that was quite a useful one. There was comment about the new focus on brilliant basics, and this is about getting the key services right and easily accessible to our residents. There were others about timescales and implementation. And it's one of those things that, you know, you tend to think, well, we can do this in 6 months. But actually, by the time you go through everything, it's going to take longer. I read one book that said it takes 9 times longer than you think it's going to. But I hope not. But that's, that's the way forward. There was discussion again in terms of using a zero-based budgeting approach. Well, actually, we're probably about as close as we can be to that in our current thing, which we will revisit when we discuss budget setting. Otherwise, we'd end up spending thousands on consultants to tell us what we should be doing. And as I said, the scrutiny also mentioned the importance of adopting the brilliant basics approach. So the recommendations that came up from them were about those 2 comments, which I think we note, and then they said they wanted a meeting to be set up to discuss comments and concerns raised at this committee meeting about the community asset transfer process. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's already in being progressed. So I think we can agree that one and note the first recommendation. So I'm happy to move those.
And I'll second those.
Brilliant. So agenda item 7, and this is over to
Thank you, Leader.
Councillor John. It's over to Gwyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This is a reference from Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee on the 11th of November 24. And these were the annual reports for sports development, play development, 60+ active leisure scheme and national exercise referral scheme. The committee members were provided with a short video in advance of the meeting, which included feedback from various service users who had benefited from the aforementioned scheme, as well as the documents appended to the report. The Chair passed her sincere thanks to all the relevant members of staff who were providing an important service for the residents of the Vale. Members of the committee also congratulated officers on the well-written report and was pleased to see that the report had been based on personal case studies as well as honest feedback from officers. The recommendations, there were 3 recommendations. 1, that the good practice be undertaken by the sport and play development exercise referral, a 60+ active leisure scheme teams be noted. 2, that a further annual report on the activities of the Council's sports and play development exercise referral and 60+ active leisure schemes teams be submitted to scrutiny committee in 2025. And 3, that both the report and supporting video be referred to Cabinet for its information. I would move that we note these recommendations, but with special request that the Cabinet have a read and look at the supporting video. It's very, very interesting. It's an excellent report from the team. And I would thank all those who have helped this group with grants to take these plans through. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn, and yeah, happy to second that, and everybody else is also in support, so that's great. So those are today's references. We've got a couple of reports of meetings, and the first one is agenda item 8, and that's the local access forum of the 27th of July, and that's over to Eddie. Over to you. Eddie, I don't know if your mic's working.
Thank you. I've obviously leaned on the mic mute button there. Thank you, Leader. I'm glad you didn't wait till I finished the report. Right, okay. So this report is comprehensive. It outlines some of the, it outlines a lot of the excellent work that's been carried out in the Vale of Glamorgan by both its officers and volunteers. In the meeting, there was discussion from the officers about, in fact, they praised the work and the input of volunteers, particularly in relation to reporting the issues and in terms of obstacles being cleared. There are some legal orders and evidential modification orders. There was an update on those. There are 3 paths which are being rolled back due to coastal erosion, and they're being looked at the moment. So we need to just revise where they are on the maps. Let me see. Yeah, Sandra Thomas advised also that there were currently 6 open files on the public rights of way, one being considered later on in the subcommittee. That's already been considered. Grant funding is obviously a key issue about how the work is carried out, and the Access Improvement Grant, which was 100% funded, received from National Resources Wales. And in that, work that's carried out is replacing stiles, kissing gates, and installing 2 footbridges over 150 way markers as well. There was an evaluation and feedback report given, and it talked in particular about improving accessibility, and a nature path pilot scheme was undertaken by National Resources Wales, and we were advised that 2 routes in the Vale of Glamorgan had been identified for inclusion, and these were West Aberthaw to Cumcullew and Penarth and Swanbridge. So we're hoping to see better services and better access to those. There was also a presentation by Tricia Cotnam, who's again National Resources Wales. She looks after the Wales Coastal Path, and it's surprising already that it's over 12 years it's been in place. So we had the 10th anniversary in 2022, and there was an outline of all the changes that have been happening and all the good work that's been happening there. And the good news was that it was highlighted in Visit Wales, who conducted an economic study of the impact of the coastal path, and Lonely Planet showcased the path as one of the places to visit. And finally, and more importantly, we're always concerned about the funding. The Welsh Government continue to allocate grant funding for large projects, and they're doing so with this. And looking forward to, well, in fact, the last 3 years it's gone up and up, so that was good news. Quick scanter through the meeting. I would like you to note the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. It sounds like an interesting meeting. I'm happy to second that we note it, and said agreement from the rest of Cabinet, so that is passed. Moving on to agenda item 9. This is back to Councillor Wilson Mark for the report of a meeting of the Cardiff Bay Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we had a very interesting meeting not that long ago about the Cardiff Bay, and just to highlight a few things. First of all, we had a discussion about navigational safety, and we had very successful dredging of the barrage outer harbour. And we also had a lot of debris recently due to the poor weather. Sadly, again, we got more of that, as you probably realised, for the last couple of weeks, to do with the bad weather and the serious flooding we've had up in Wonvercombe and Taff. And obviously, that will affect the Taff going down to our area. Also, we had updates on sluice repairs, lock maintenance and salinity regulations. We also note that next year will be 30th anniversary of the construction of the barrage, and an upcoming 25th completion of the actual barrage itself. And it feels like yesterday. But if you remember those changes that have occurred, they've made an enormous positive difference, I feel, to the community around Cardiff Bay and the marina in Penarth as well. And I will note that. And obviously, once I get more information, I will pass it on to our Cabinet and Council colleagues. We also had a report from NRW, Natural Resources Wales, which reported good dissolved oxygen levels. They had at that time no pollution incidents. And we had also updates on the fish path and leachate management at Fayroe Landfill. Councillor Thomas, who's my vice chair, also noted and made references to the Cardiff Half Marathon and the positive impact upon the Cardiff Bay businesses, and also the amount of money raised for lots and lots of good charities due to that. And also highlights, of course, the works that have been going on in the Bay and developments from it. And the meeting concluded with plans for follow-ups in the next session. And obviously we'll have follow-ups on those matters. And I move that we note the minutes. So I'd like someone to second that, please.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I used to really love attending those, but you've obviously got a great depth of information from it. I'm happy to second that we note, and everyone here is in agreement as well, so that's fine. Thank you. So moving on to our reports for today, the first report is agenda item 10, and that's it's our regular update in terms of sickness absence, and it sets out the sickness absence figures for the periods 1st of April 2024 to 30th September 2024. And that, I said that's part of our not usual performance management arrangement. The absence figures have increased slightly based on the same period last year, but they are actually improved on the 2022-23 figures, and increases have taken place in non-schools directorates. If you have a look at the section that starts on paragraph 2, and that runs through the issues or initiatives that we're doing in terms of employee welfare or well-being, positive health promotion, and also our absence policy and what we can do to be supporting our staff in terms of health going forward. There are appendices that give more details on this, and that's Appendix A has got the breakdown of absence by service area. Appendix B, the overall sickness absence rates. Appendix C is the sickness absence breakdown by directorate. And Appendix D is the sickness absence by age, which we have there. So they're pretty comprehensive. As usual, these reports are referred to scrutiny, so I'm sure there'll be a greater depth of discussion there, and I would imagine that their comments will come back to us in due course where we can discuss them further. So the two recommendations for us today are that the report and the sickness absence figures for April 24 to September 24 provided in Appendix A be noted, that the report be referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for consideration, with any recommendations referred back to Cabinet for further consideration. And I'd move.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. And everyone's happy with that. So before we move into some of the reports related to this year's budget, we'll take our usual look at revenue monitoring, and this is for Q2 of this financial year. Hang on, let's have a look at my notes, and it's the monitoring for the period to the end of September, and it does show a slight deterioration due partially to an increase in the social services overspend in year across both children's and young people, and adult services as well, and also an emerging overspend in school transport. And I think, as we've explained before, we took a decision to actually act decisively on any delays in hospital discharges, and what's happened there is obviously it costs more money. So, but we're happy that people are coming out of hospital and getting home faster than they previously had. And in terms of school transport, when we look at the complexity of need in our children and the demographic increase in additional learning needs, there is also an increase in school transport, but also standard transport. The transport costs are actually more expensive, and we'll go into that in more depth as we go into budget setting. I mean, we had seen this as a significant growth area for this year, but that alongside inflationary pressures has increased in excess of what we'd allocated. We'll be focusing back on that for the 2025-26 budget, and it's also something that we're looking at in the reshaping programme as a priority area. Appendices 2 and 3 of the report are data points illustrating some of the growth in demand, which are linked to that. In addition to those pressures, there are also continuing pressures across highways maintenance, and we're sort of getting to peak challenges in terms of highway surfacing with extreme cold and extreme wet, street cleansing, and also additional learning needs services. There is an unplanned use of reserves in year so far of about 14.2 million, and that's after a contribution of £1 million from the projected council tax service, a surplus. And the school's position is still modelled on a net deficit outturn at about 4.3 million. However, current deficits are currently reported closer to 10 million, which is a concern. Historically, though, school deficits tend to reduce during the financial year, so it's hoped that additional grant funding and energy funding will help to mitigate this position. The school task force continues to work closely with schools to help review the position, and additional resource to support schools in a deficit position is currently being considered to be funded from the reserves. I mean, it is a difficult situation, isn't it, for a school whose primary aim is learning and teaching and support for young people, to also be expert financial managers at the same time. So we will be making sure that they get that support. In the context of the additional pressures reported as part of the Course 2 monitoring, all use of reserves is being considered by a senior leadership team to provide additional rigour, and they go through those figures in depth. There are now recruitment controls which are being implemented, which equates in effect to a recruitment freeze, unless the posts are related to statutory requirements, but those are still reviewed. Further examination of any sort of errant expenditure will be undertaken by the accountancy team, and some work streams identified as part of reshaping will be accelerated. And that would be in respect, for example, of adult and children's social services, and also school transport arrangements. The projected achievements of savings in year so far is approximately 70%. And while some of the gap will be met from the budget risk reserve, this also represents a pressure on revenue budgets in year if we can't achieve all our savings. There is additional grant funding available for homeless and housing pressures in year, and this is reflected in a reduced drawdown from the reserve. And the rapid rehousing programme is taking effect. We are actually starting to get ahead of the curve on that, and it's considered that the reserve use can be stepped down in 2025-26 also. The monitoring position reflects the housing revenue account revised budget, which is also included in this agenda, and the revised budget also includes some environments for energy pressures. The unplanned use of reserves alongside other commitments will see reserves projected to reduce to 50 million at year end, and this includes some use of the council's fund. And this would be the priority for mitigation in year, to maintain the fund at the policy level set by the 151 officer as part of the proposals. It's essential that our general fund is set at the correct level to ensure that that we have effective reserves. So that is the monitoring position at the end of quarter 2, and we've just got 2 recommendations to go with this, and that's that the position with regard to the authority's 2024-25 revenue budget be noted, and secondly that the Cabinet approves the revised budget 2024-25 as set out in the report.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. And agenda item 12 is the capital monitoring for the period April 1st to September 30th, 2024. And so this is in effect a progress of the capital programme. time the report was written, the approved programme totalled just over 137 million, and that included some budget that was slipped from the previous year of about 15 million. If all the requests within the report to amend the capital programme are approved, the revised forecast outturn is projected to be slightly over 90 million, and the spend to the end of June is just over 25 million. Appendix 1 details the financial progress on the capital programme as of the 30th of September by scheme, and Appendix 2 sets out by directorate the changes from the approved budget at final proposals in March 24, movements in year, including slippages and additions, and demonstrates the journey to the revised forecast outturn for 2024-25. And I think it's fair to say that the inclusion of that monitoring by directorate and sort of moves in the programme has partially been what's helped us to successfully deliver our capital programmes. Again, it's important to note that many areas are continuing to experience increasing costs with the delivery of the schemes, where some tenders are being received over the current budget, so we've been required to renegotiate tenders. Some schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends. Officers continue to work with project managers and sponsors to ensure value for money and that all possible funding opportunities are identified and fully explored. And I think we'll be hearing more about some of those shortly. The report details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved and also notes the use of emergency powers, and those are detailed at Appendix 1 to the report. 2 schemes have been highlighted which are being delivered in the 2024-25 capital programme. First, St Joseph's Roman Catholic Primary School, which is a photovoltaic panel scheme under decarbonisation, and those panels were installed in August 24. Secondly, Sports Wales grant funding for 3 schemes. The report request to make several amendments to the current capital programme. Some of the larger amendments would be the reprofile of Ysgolion Morgannwg and St Richard Gwyn redevelopment in 2024-25 and the future years capital programme. The carry forward of just over 7 million of the housing improvement programme also into the 2025-26 capital programme, and a reprofile of the non-treasury investment strategy in future capital programmes. So quite a comprehensive report, but still very much on track. Before I come to the recommendations, I can see that Gwyn, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I take you to page 5, paragraph 2.6, Environment Sports Wales grants. Sport Wales funding was secured to deliver 3 schemes across 2 sites. The total cost of these schemes was 175,000, of which Sport Wales granted us 158,000. This went to new flooring was laid at Colca Sports Hall, Lantern Major Leisure Centre, and a new hair handling pump installed at Lantern Major Leisure Centre. All schemes have now been completed. Confirmation has also been recently received that further funding has been secured of 50,000 of a total project of 70,000 for the new flooring at Cowbridge Leisure Centre, and this scheme should be delivered this financial year. I would just like to point out that without Sport Wales, these projects could not go ahead, and I'm very grateful to Sport Wales for supporting us, because these were vital, particularly the sports halls, because we wouldn't be able to open them if that funding wasn't available to repair them. So I would special thanks to Sport Wales. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwyn. And I would echo that. I think we were both also at the skate park that was launched in the NAP, weren't we? And that was, we received support for that as well. So brilliant. So some in the report, some super photos, aren't there, of the new floor at Llantwit Major Leisure Centre. So I'll have to come and visit. So the recommendations that we've got, I do not, because they run to 2 pages, I don't intend to read them all. If I just read the main part. The recommendations, firstly, are Cabinet notes the progress made on delivering the 2024-25 capital programme. 2, that Cabinet notes the use of delegated authority as set out in the report. 3, Cabinet notes the use of emergency powers as detailed in Appendix 1. And 4, Cabinet approves the following changes to the 2024-25 capital programme and future years capital programme. And if Cabinet note, it's on page 2, the rest of page 2 and most of page 3, and those would be contained. Okay. So I'm happy to move those.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Super, thank you. And everybody else is happy to support. Right, so having a look at agenda item 13, and this is the Treasury Management mid-year report. And I would imagine it's soon that all members get a briefing on the Treasury Management. We have an annual training course on this. The mid-year report is prepared in compliance with the SIPFA 2021 revised code of practice on treasury management, and that is a requirement for us. And it contains a whole range of different headings. And so first of all, you've got the economic update that looks at the factors that were driving the UK economy during the period under review. So that goes up to the end of September. An analysis of interest rate forecasts for the period December 24 to March 2027, because that has an impact on the length of borrowing and things that we are likely to get into if we think that interest rates are going to change. Treasury management strategy for 2023-24, and that actually there are no policy changes as of the 30th of September this year to the Treasury Management Treasury Management Policy and Investment Strategy. The next section is the Council Capital Expenditure and Prudential Indicators Review, and that's actually contained at Appendix 1. And the Treasury Management, Prudential and Treasury Indicators are based on the Q2 Capital Monitoring Report that's been reported on the same agenda as this report. The Council is required to raise 30.37 million in new loans to finance the capital programme in 2024-25. And I think it's important to note that we have to be very careful about how much we take out in loans, because that has a direct impact on our revenue budget. You know, the finance charges have to be funded from our revenue budget. Appendix 1 provides a detailed summary of the Council's current prudential and treasury indicators and the outlook as well for the next 3 years. Following advice, all new loans have been borrowed over a shorter term, and that's what I was referring to as interest rates are forecast to fall. So we would not want to be having long-term loans now if we could actually get those loans at a lower rate subsequently. So this is considered a prudent course of action, which will benefit the council in the longer term, although it's not what we would normally do. The investment portfolio for 2024-25 shows that the investments as of the 30th of September 2024 were 15.38 million down from the 34.195 million as of the 1st of April 2024, and that's because of the different change in interest rates. And the interest earned was an average rate of 5.26 between 1st of April and 30th of September, and amounted to £872,229 being accrued interest, or including accrued interest. The borrowing strategy for this year, the section on that talks about the new external borrowing undertaken during the first 6 months of this year, and that's 15 million at an average rate of 4.12%. And due to high borrowing costs, the council, as I said, are borrowing a shorter term, up to 7 years. I mean, I think most of us doing household borrowing wouldn't think that 7 years was shorter term, but in terms of council accounting, then 7 years would actually be a short time. Maturing Public Works Loans Board debt repaid during the first 6 months of this year totalled slightly over 7 million at an average rate of 4.84%. And all borrowing this year so far has been to support the housing revenue account, as there's currently a 60 basis point projection rate deduction available until June 2026. So that's all gone to housing. External debt of 30th of September 2024 was 147, just over 147 million, up from 143-ish million as of the 1st of April 2024, with external interest at an average rate of 4.34% and amounting to 3.212 million was paid on these loans during the first 6 months of this year. Estimated total interest to be charged to revenue for external borrowing for pooled loans is 1.363 million at a rate of 4.85, and the estimated borrowing average rate for interest charged for pooled loans, and that's external and internal borrowing for 2024-25, is 4.52%. The council hasn't considered any debt rescheduling opportunities so far this financial year, but they would be reported if that happened in subsequent reports. So this is a similarly comprehensive report to the ones we usually receive, and there are 3 recommendations before us today. And that's that Cabinet approves the Treasury Management mid-year report for the period 1st of April 2024 to 30th of September 2024 and refers the same to full council on the 2nd of December for consideration. That the latest Treasury Management indicators as set out in Appendix 1 be approved and referred to full council on the 2nd of December 2024 for consideration, and that notwithstanding recommendations 1 and 2, the report also be forwarded to the next Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee for consideration and discussion. I just need to check, do we need to do... Yes. So, and we also need to add a 4th recommendation on there, which is that we use the council's urgency procedure, which is section 1514 on the Constitution, to enable it to go to full council next week. Super. So I'm happy to move that.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. And we're all happy, and we'll discuss it all again on Monday. Full council. So agenda item 14, we've already mentioned that we were going to be discussing the housing revenue account, and this is it's the housing revenue account budget, it's a revised budget for 2024-25 and the proposals going forward for 25-26. And the report provides an update on the revised budget, and the revised budget, let's have a quick look. If we have a quick look at the 2024-25 position first, the housing revenue account reserve is forecast to increase by a further 590,000 as at 31st of March 2025 to 4.1 million. And I think there was a typo in the thing. So there was a typo somewhere in the report, which I need to find, that said it was 41 million, which was wrong. We'll find that and amend it. And it's keeping the reserve at above policy level in the face of potential liabilities that may come forward. There are a number of movements contributing to this period. There was a 1.059 million increase in costs in year, and the most notable of which is repairs, where there's been significant inflationary and supply increases. These have been offset by in-year savings and efficiencies of 1.109 million against the most notable being the provision for bad and doubtful debt, which can be reduced by 0.894 million due to revised forecasts of arrears at year end. The forecast level of capital met from revenue is down by 1.041 million, reflecting the current profile of development and maintenance works in the capital programme, which we've just discovered. And also, as a consequence, rental income is also forecast lower. The units at Eagles, while taking slightly longer than planned to come into stock, but they are now, and revenue or rental income being received. Going forward for 2025-26, the initial proposals are being developed. There's committed growth with additional capital financing costs and repairs expenditure, which being the main drivers. This is met in part by the rental income increase. There had been an expectation of the Welsh Government cap being 3%, in that it is normally assumed that increases are CPI plus 1%. So, and that would continue, but and that CPI had returned back to about 2% during July and August. But in September it dropped to 1.7%, so the cap is 2.7. It means that some remodelling will be necessary ahead of the business plan that comes forward to Council in early January. The next steps are set out at the end of the report, and that is that the estimates will be submitted to Scrutiny Committee for consideration, and that's Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee is the lead one, so that considers it, but also looks at the any comments and proposals from the Housing and Scrutiny Committee. There will also be a series of budget working group sessions in late November, where relevant cabinet members and officers will consider the cost savings and look forward to bringing forward a sustainable budget. And then the Cabinet's final budget proposals will be considered in Council at a meeting likely to be in January. But if you look at paragraph 2.2, that actually gives all the timescales for that. So that's fairly straightforward, and we just have 4 recommendations before us on that. Firstly, the Cabinet approves the revised housing revenue account budget for 2024-25 as set out in paragraph 2.2. The Cabinet approves the initial housing revenue account budget proposal for 2025-26 as set out in paragraph 211. 3, that Cabinet submits the revised 2024-25 budget and initial proposals for 2025-26 to the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee for consideration, and that any recommendations are forwarded to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee as the lead scrutiny committee in order for their recommendations to be forwarded to Cabinet. And finally, that Cabinet notes the increase for rent and other services are subject to a future report to Cabinet as soon as the guidance is issued by Welsh Government. And I would move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Super. And everyone else happy with those? So yes, we're fine. And then we go forward to the medium-term financial plan for 2025-26 through to 2029-30. That's a refresh and an update. And the reason why it's a refresh and an update is this actually comes forward to Cabinet and from there on to scrutinies a few times a year. We normally look at, or we have looked at the medium-term financial plan back in July, and where we sort of outlined the initial thinking of the council, the initial picture in terms of budget pressures. We've then had the monitoring reports as we've gone through the year, and through the summer, I think it's fair to say most holidays are cancelled in this council, aren't they? Through the summer, we've pulled together all the expected cost pressures, the inflation figures, all the things that we are likely to have to face going forward as a council, and we bring them together for this report. And this is where we can see the gap between what we're looking at in terms of to deliver our services as we would want versus the income that we will receive. From this point, we then, once we find out the finance that we are due to, or we're going to receive from Welsh Government for next year, we will then put these figures together with those, and we will bring reports through to we'll bring to Cabinet and scrutiny as part of the actual budget setting process in the new year. So just to sort of go through that, the report is an update to the financial position, as I said, that we reported in July, and it sets out the next steps. I think it's worth saying, and it is something that has an impact on what we're doing. This, not only is this council the second lowest funded of all Welsh counties, it's also a low spending council in terms of, if you benchmark us against other councils, but it's a low council tax authority as well. In the Q1 revenue monitoring for this financial year to Cabinet in September, we reported growing additional learning needs requirements, social care and school transport pressures, along with challenging financial positions in our schools, with the prospect of an increasing number of schools in deficit. And as we saw in the Q2 report on the agenda, these pressures persist, and they are expected to continue. That there will be continued increased demand into next year and to the medium term. Social care and schools are accounting for an ever-increasing proportion of the council's resources. So if we look at the last financial year, social care and schools accounted for 68% of our budget. This year, it's 70%. So it's taken 2% more of our budget. And doubtless, as we move into budget setting for next year, it will probably move into the 70% rather than being at 70%. And what that means is that all other pressures, all other departments will be subject to increased pressure on their budgets. So these pressures are alongside constrained growth in funding. We're still modelling a 3.99% increase in council tax, and we're forecasting, as we have been advised to date, a 1% increase only in Welsh Government grant. However, with the recent UK Government announcements, we are anticipating that we will do better than the 1%. The Chancellor's UK budget on the 30th of October was better than expected for the public sector. as the Chancellor set out her plans to repair public finances with the additional funding for health, social care and schools at a UK level. There are 1.7 billion in consequentials for Wales. That does span this year and next year. So in part will address the existing commitments to pay awards, which have been significantly higher than in last year's settlement, but it's too early at this stage to assess the impact on local government, and so much hangs on the Welsh Government settlement to be announced on the 10th of September. We will be watching avidly to see what happens. So when we did the calculations over the summer, the council has underlying pressures on its budget of 34 million. And so in the intervening period, we've had to take a thorough review of those as part of our strategy to deliver a balanced budget. And so we can say that they've been managed down to 23 million. So it's gone down from 34 million to 23 million. But those are choices of things that we will not do. And it's not just oh, well, it's a nice to do. We are actually having to decide things that really we would like to build into the budget. But that still leaves a gap of 14.8 million. The council is working through its reshaping and efficiency programmes to bridge this gap. And proposals, as I've mentioned earlier, we'll bring those forward to Cabinet in January. And from there, they will go out to public consultation and scrutiny. So I would hope that the full council, but also our residents, our communities, will work with us to find out what actually is important. The position will be reviewed once the settlement is known, and there will be a reassessment of cost pressures and transformation and efficiency savings. Once we know the fine. So this is not the finished figure, but I think we can be fair to say that there will potentially be upward pressure on council tax, given the unprecedented social care and schools pressures, and that's particularly around additional learning needs. We will continue to lobby for the appropriate level of resources for local authorities and for a fairer funding settlement for this council, especially the schools funding block. And I'm spending, for the last couple of months, I've been spending part of every week elsewhere from the council actually lobbying for that. But as I said, as I mentioned, there will be a budget for consultation early in the new year, and then a draft budget to Cabinet at the end of February. And from there, it will go forward to Council on the 10th of March for agreement. The budget is being developed in parallel to the new corporate plan, and the consultation for that is still open for just over another week. So the two should go hand in hand. The budget is designed to provide sufficient resource for us to deliver the corporate plan over the next year. Fortunately, then hopefully there will be another spending review by UK government next spring, and we will have longer term funding that we can plan more strategically at that level. So that's the current position, the current budget position. It is difficult, but we felt it necessary that everybody knew exactly the arena that we're currently working in. There are 8 recommendations, but they're fairly short, so I will go through them fully. And the first one is Cabinet notes the revised budget gap of 14.838 million in 2025-26 and 42.422 million across the medium term. Secondly, that Cabinet notes the underlying pressures in 2025-26 of 34.325 million and a budget gap of 25.948 million before management action. So that was the scale that we've managed down. 3, the Cabinet notes the work already undertaken to manage and mitigate the unprecedented inflationary and demand pressures being experienced. 4, Cabinet notes the ongoing work to identify transformational opportunities and tactical savings to be brought forward in the budget for consultation report in January. 5, Cabinet notes the low prospects for an improvement settlement and the upward pressure on council tax. 6, Cabinet notes the ongoing work to lobby Welsh Government for improved funding settlements to cover the growth in ALN, social care, education, transport and homelessness costs. A review of the funding mechanism, especially the formula for schools, and an uplift to statutory fee levels for care contributions and planning fees. 7, Cabinet notes the prospect of a UK multi-year settlement to be announced in the spring budget. And finally, Cabinet refers this report to the Council's scrutiny committees, all of them, to review the work mitigating the cost pressures for their consideration and for any recommendations to be referred back to Cabinet. And I look forward to receiving those. And I would move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. And there are no comments from Cabinet, so we'll move on. So agenda item 16 is a report from the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language, and this is related to conclusions of a Welsh Government's middle tier review, future direction for school improvement services. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right. So this was a report that looked into the operation of the Education Consortium for Central and South Wales. There were concerns about how it was operating, about the delivery of school improvement services, and to a lesser extent, fortunately, the curriculum and professional learning support, which is all across Wales. And a particular concern that these arrangements were not sitting well with local authorities' statutory responsibilities for the performance of schools in their area. So the Welsh Government undertook a national review of school improvement services with a variety of recommendations and guidance for local authorities to strengthen the arrangements across regional and local level. So the Welsh Government asked local authorities to cooperate in this and to put forward some of their own proposals. After all, they're the people delivering education on the ground, setting out plans for reconfiguring school improvement services by this month, actually, November 24, and there will be detailed operating models coming out later in the school year. There's a lot of feedback from teachers and a wide exploration of practice across schools and how this was actually taking place with the consortium. And there was a consensus across the 5 local authorities involved in our consortium for the core elements of a future operating model. And these included school improvement should be underpinned by collective responsibility, seen as a collective endeavour, and this principle should underpin all future approaches. For example, asking a head in one cluster to go in and assess how another school in the cluster is doing if it's felt to be underperforming. Though some heads had difficulties with that, they didn't want to be seen to be sitting in judgment on their fellow teachers in their cohort, but others were quite happy to do this. And I think that's going to be something that will have to be worked out in the actual practice. Theory is all very well. Local authorities to develop governance arrangements to discuss and reflect upon the progress being made by schools, bringing together local intelligence to identify local priorities, steering the regional professional learning and curriculum support offer and responding to and informing national priorities. Because obviously schools in one cluster are going to have different challenges and different priorities than perhaps schools in another. Obviously their main purpose is going to be the education of children, but there will be local circumstances that may create a difference in the way that this is approached. And the delivery of school improvement function should be undertaken by individual local authorities. So we no longer be part of that consortium. The local authority will take back control of that element, but there will still be some degree of cooperation. Obviously, there are going to be subjects and areas of expertise that each local authority will need to be responsible for. But for example, minor subjects, I can see that cooperation between authorities is going to be the way forward. Otherwise, it's going to be a very expensive operation. Professional learning and curriculum support should continue to be organised and delivered as now across the 5 local authorities within the consortium regional footprint. And the professional learning offer will be led by the priorities of schools and local authorities articulated through local government arrangements. So each school and each cluster will have different priorities again, depending on the challenges that their schools face. So there are 4 recommendations. The Cabinet considers and notes the update on Welsh Government review of roles and responsibilities of education partners in Wales and delivery of school improvement arrangements. So the middle tier review as set out in this report and in Appendix A and Appendix B. The Cabinet approves in principle the proposals for the future direction for school improvement services in the Vale of Glamorgan. The Cabinet considers further reports detailing operating models with specific financial, HR and legal implications and final models in the spring of 2025. And the Cabinet approves the delegation of authority to the Director of Learning and Skills in consultation with a Cabinet Member for Arts, Education and the Welsh Language to take the necessary next steps as outlined in paragraph 2.17 in this report. And I'm looking for a seconder, please.
And I'm happy to second. Thank you. Thanks for that report.
Thank you.
And yeah, everybody's happy. So that's agreed. Thank you. Next agenda item is one of 2 for Cabinet Member for Public Sector Housing and Tenant Engagement. This is a part 1 report. There will be a part 2 report later on the agenda. So this is agenda item 17, Housing Development Programme. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the Housing Development Programme forecast final account for the development of Hoyle Crossio temporary accommodation project in Lantwick Major. So this report brings to the attention of Cabinet a proposal to agree the forecast final account with Waits Residential Limited after the completion of the scheme. The forecast final account relating to the scheme has been reviewed and verified by the Council's employer's agent, Cost Consultants RPA Limited. So if you just give a little bit of background to this. So Waits were appointed in January 23 as main contractor by way of JCT Design and Build 2016 edition contract to deliver a scheme of 90 units of factory-built modular temporary accommodation and associated works on the site of former Eagleswell Primary School in Lantwick Major. So the modular homes, which the 90 of those were to be built by At Homes Limited, based in Nottinghamshire, and BT Passive Limited in BPL, based in Norwich. So BPL were to supply 34 units, and At Home Limited were to supply 56. So the actual construction of the units began to take place at the factories. Unfortunately, BT Passive went into insolvency, meaning that those modular homes had to be recovered to At Home Limited and transported to Nottinghamshire factory for their subsequent completion and delivery to the site. So in recovering from the insolvency of BPL, the scheme was delayed by 6.5 months, with Waits finally achieving the practical completion finally on the 23rd of October 2024. Having achieved the practical completion, there is a need to agree the forecast final account with Waits in order that the financial matters relating to the insolvency by BPL Limited and its effects on the construction programme can be resolved. So there's 2 recommendations for this. The first recommendation is that the Cabinet notes a proposal to agree the forecast final account with Waits Residential Limited for the completion of the scheme, and 2, the requirement of Cabinet to take formal decisions on the progression of the above proposal as part of the wider consideration detailed in Part 2 report later in the agenda be agreed. So I move those recommendations.
Thank you, Sandra. And as we said, we'll discuss it again in part 2. But in the meantime, I'm happy to second those recommendations. Thank you. And the next report is also for you. That is agenda item 18, the Housing PAS 2035 retrofit scheme, which I find hugely exciting. So I look forward to hearing from it.
Thank you, Leader, and I entirely agree with you. I think this is a really exciting a pilot project that we'll sort of look at now. So it's to advise Cabinet of the request to accept the most advantageous tender and execute the contract for the Housing PAS 2035 retrofit scheme for 24-25. So working with Michael Dyson Associates Limited, the Council's Housing Development Investment Team has developed a pilot retrofit scheme, Housing PAS 2035 retrofit scheme for 24-25, taking the whole house approach to decarbonising 26 properties, including blocks of flats within the council's housing stock. And this report advises Cabinet of the tender process, and we will discuss, which we'll also discuss further in part 2. During the last few years, the Housing Development Investment Team has been developing the knowledge and skills associated with the development and delivery of retrofit projects schemes on a large scale in order to decarbonise the Council's housing stock by the 31st of March 2034, as required by the latest version, the Welsh Housing Quality Standard, WHQS 2023. Working with Dyson's Associates Limited, the team has developed a pilot retrofit scheme, taking a whole house approach to decarbonising 26 properties, as I mentioned before, blocks of flats as well as housing. So the projects include following properties in Dudley Place, Peterswell Road, O'Donnell Road and Cornwall Road. So the retrofit scheme project, this involves individuals qualified as retrofit assessors, designers and co-coordinators, and this expertise has been provided by Michael Dyson's Associates Limited to ensure the pilot scheme has been developed in line with the PAS 2035 requirements. So this scheme will be used as a learning exercise to understand timescales whilst following the actual required stages, as well as the impact of installing and tenants using the latest renewable technologies. So again, I have 2 recommendations. So one is Cabinet notes the contents of the report with a view to taking a decision on the award of the contract detailed within part 2. And the use of the Council's urgent decision procedure as set out as section 15.14 of the Council's Constitution to be agreed to enable the contract arrangements to be expedited. So I'd like to move those recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Sandra. As I said, I think this is hugely exciting because while we have a commitment to achieving Project Zero or to achieving zero carbon, we, as with everybody else, we're on a sort of a learning journey, aren't we, to find out the best ways of doing this and to actually ensure that our housing stock is also low or zero carbon. So I really look forward to the outcomes of this and seeing how it works, and also seeing how the residents feel afterwards. Hopefully it will make a huge difference to their fuel bills. So very, very happy to second this, and I think, yes, from what I can see, everybody else is too, so that's passed. Thank you. So coming on to our final report on the Part 1 agenda is one from the Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Equalities and Regulatory Services, and that's related to local air quality management. So over to you, Ruba, Councillor Sivanyanan.
Thank you very much, Liz. So you'll all be familiar with this annual report about the air quality in our county. We're required to report to Welsh Government annually on the quality of our air, and it's a good report. It's a very short report, but it's a good report in terms of the fact that we are well below our nitrogen dioxide levels, for example. There is an appendix to this report, which is the report that we are required to submit to Welsh Government as our annual progress report. And Welsh Government need to approve that by the 31st of December, which is why it's come to us, to you today. I mean, just by way of background, really, the local air quality management process places this statutory duty on all local authorities to regularly review and assess air quality in their areas. So in the Vale, we have 53 specifically allocated, they're called non-automatic monitoring sites across the Vale, which monitor nitrogen dioxide, and they don't produce live data, but just for in detail, they're diffusion tubes that are placed at the site, and they collect data on a sort of monthly basis, and you'll see in the appendix that we are below the top level of nitrogen dioxide. We're well below that, and you may recall that we had some concerns in Penarth, in fact, of nitrogen dioxide levels, and we had some special monitoring there, but we have no concerns. There are no concerns there. The only thing I would mention, as an addition to this report, that isn't included in the actual report, it just might be worth mentioning that some of you might know that the Welsh Government basically incorporated WHO recommendations around air quality, and that's called the Environment, Air Quality and Soundscapes brackets Wales Act for 2024. I think that was in January of this year. And they will likely place more stringent and wider, reporting measures for this. So, we will see that, perhaps next year in terms of our reporting. But I'm sure that we're able to meet any of those targets, any of those new targets that might be set. So other than that, I have two recommendations. The first is that obviously that Cabinet notes these results and at Appendix 1, and that Cabinet approves the 2024 Annual Progress Report, which is, as I say, attached at Appendix 1, for submission to Welsh Government for approval. So I would move those recommendations.
Thank you. Yes, happy to second those. And really good news that we've moved forward on air quality, and fingers crossed we'll move further forward as we hopefully get some new train rolling stock, and that should also help, shouldn't it? So yeah, happy to approve that, and also nodding in around the room, and no dissent online. Thanks, Ruba, for that.
Thanks.
Moving on to agenda item 20, that's any items that I've decided are urgent, and I don't have any. However, as I'd previously mentioned, we do have two items for discussion on today's agenda under part 2. They were the ones linked to agenda items 17 and 18. These are matters that are considered to be confidential, and so therefore the meeting will need to move into private session where we can discuss such matters. Therefore, I'll ask for the Cabinet to agree to move to part 2, and ask the Cabinet officer to stop the recording of this open session to ensure that no members of the public are present after this point, and to only allow relevant parties to remain to hear the detail of the items to be discussed. Following the meeting, the outcome of the part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, and that will advise all parties of the final decisions of the Cabinet for the relevant items. So if I could therefore formally move part 2.
And I'll formally second.
Thank you. Ask the Cabinet Officer to ensure that only relevant parties remain from this point on, and for the live stream and recording to be stopped, please. And if I could